let's welcome Tom Dowd as he presents the speech contest.
I had knee surgery last January. Oh, I'm fine now. But as I limped up here, maybe, just maybe, some of you said, oh, I hope he's okay. And maybe gave me just a little bit of sympathy. And maybe there's another group out there saying, he's not ready. He's probably on Vicodin. He's going to have to really blow my socks off to gain any type of credibility. And maybe there's some of you out there who said, he's been walking around fine all day, he's now lying to me, and your credibility is shot. All of those, whether it's conscious or unconscious, creates these biases that in a speech competition creates subjectivity. As a Toastmaster, I've been a contestant, I've been a judge, I've been in many different roles. In order for a contest to be successful, everybody in these seats, whether they are just an audience member, in a role, they're a judge, they're all working towards the same thing. Reduce that subjectivity. So what does everyone want in an effective contest?
A fair contest.
A fair contest. So at the end of a good contest, you want it to be fair. What else?
Fun.
We want it to be fun.
Organized.
We want it to be organized.
Everyone participates.
Everyone participates. So you want satisfied participants, people who are competing. You want a satisfied audience. You want people who are competing to say, yeah, we got that right. We sent the right person up to the next level. But there are challenges to that. And some of those challenges are the best speaker who met the contest criteria may not be the favorite speaker. We might have some situations where the audience or even the contestants are saying, what just happened? And you might have some people saying, well, they didn't follow the criteria. Or you might even have an audience who said, oh, love that story. Why didn't they win? Or a judge who says, I love that story. I'm going to pick them. And didn't follow the criteria. A good contest can only happen if it is well organized and well judged. Have any of you ever walked into a contest just thinking you're going to be a spectator and someone says, can you help me please and be a judge? Yeah, that's well organized. Have you ever been in a judge's briefing and the chief judge says, oh, you guys have done this before. Let me know if you have any questions. Yeah, I'm getting head. That's not good. We all have responsibilities as Toastmasters to put on the best contest that we can. So let's start with the participants. In my very first contest, it was the international contest, and they said it's a 5 to 7 minute speech on whatever you want. That was my training. Those were the expectations. I didn't even know there was a judging form until I got to the division level.
Ooh.
I could have asked questions. I should have asked questions. I didn't ask questions. So we have expectations to say, if you have questions, ask them. This year's World Championship of Public Speaking, the semi-finalists, and you would know this, one of the semi-finalists who won didn't realize he needed a new speech 3 days later. See how important it is to set expectations? Standing up on the world stage saying, I don't have a speech for you, which is really what happened? Think about that. So how critical is the number of judges? Pretty important, isn't it? The difference between 5 and 7 is statistically huge. But let's stick with the simplicity here. If you have 5 judges, each one represents 20%. You have 7 judges, it drops down to 14%. You have 13 judges, it only drops down to 8%. And so these biases that are out there get flattened when you have more judges. We want an even playing field. So I'm going to give you some examples of things that have happened to me in contests. I've had judges fall asleep. I didn't think I was that bad. I've had a judge with a bag this big, rustling through it, looking for a pen so she could then judge me while she was talking to herself. Paper rustling. I've had a judge sit there the entire time and watch the entire competition without taking one note, doing it purely off of memory. The only note they took is first, second, and third at the very end. Have you ever had a 4-way tie? A 3-way tie, excuse me, because we had 4 judges. I had a judge come up to me after, and by the way, don't do this if you're a judge. Oh, I've seen your speech before. I didn't even put you on the ballot.
Wow. Did you ask him to pull that knife out?
I didn't win, by the way. But in our most recent division contest, we had 13 judges. I was the ballot counter. 12 judges had pretty close to first, second, and third. They were all on the same page. And then we had some judge over here. I don't even think they wrote contestants who were competing down on the paper. They weren't even close to what anyone else was. If we only had 4 or 5 judges, we would have had a different outcome. A little bit of inequity, or even just the perception of inequity, creates this bitter taste for a lot of people, whether it's the audience people with roles or the contestants themselves. And it takes an awful lot to put a contest together. The contest chair goes through an awful lot of organization. They have to do an awful lot of collaboration, and it's not easy. If you've ever been a contest chair, regardless of what level, at the club, at the district, don't do it alone. You have to have a team to do this. Because that way everyone's putting in the effort, all working towards the same goal, but you can't do it on your own. Think about who's involved in a contest. You have an audience. You have people with the roles. You have contestants. You have people that are judges. In our division contest last year, we changed the location 3 days before the contest. Doesn't seem like a big deal unless you live in Maine. The contestants, some of them had to drive an additional 2 hours. They were already driving 2 hours. 4-hour drive, some of them said, forget it. So now you have contestants backing out, and it's too late for the people who were below them to say, well, now I'll compete, so now you have less competitors. You have audience members, and there were only 10 in the audience, because we had publicized some other place, some other time. And you have the contestants who are speaking. Who are the judges? Oh, they're the ones with the clipboard? As a speaker, I'm speaking directly to the judges now, and I'm not giving a presentation. It changes completely the complexity, and it talks about how you're interacting with the audience. It changes your delivery. It changes everything. Simply because we changed the location. We also can't discount the counters. You can't discount the timers, the sergeant at arms. Did you realize if you were writing the first, second, and third place certificates and you got it backwards, it's official as soon as it's announced? Do you realize if you wrote them out right but you announced them backwards, it's still official unless someone challenges it immediately? The little intricate details of a contest need to be followed. But if you don't have someone like the sergeant of arms or ballot counters, someone saying, hold on a second, stop, you're going to have the wrong winner. Our district conference, last week, I talked to this guy, Dan. I said, are you competing? He said, yeah, luckily. I said, what do you mean? He said, I finished in 3rd place. I said, oh, I'm sorry. What are you doing here? He said, I actually finished first. They announced me as 3rd. But the other 2 couldn't go on. He actually won the contest. we were very lucky that he was able to present. It is extremely important during a briefing to go through the rule book ahead of time, by the way. Preparation is going to be your best friend. If you are a contest chair or you are the chief judge, print out the rule book and write down the notes you want to ensure are covered during a briefing. They are spelled out very clearly in the book, but you want some points you want to emphasize, and we'll go over some of those points. So what happens in a briefing? Can a contestant compete for more than one club? How about hands yes? Hands no? Multiple clubs. Can I compete for multiple clubs?
Yeah.
If you are a good standing member, absolutely. I competed for 2 or 3 in the last contest. Now, if you are moving on to the next level, you have to make a decision. Which area do you want to compete? Which club do you want to represent? Can I compete in multiple areas?
Yes.
No, you cannot. But yet there have been situations where people have. And what happens when you're moving up and then up here they say, oh, gee, a mistake's been made. They're no longer eligible, and the people below them are out of luck. And it's unfortunate. That's why it's important that we're not just collecting forms, but we're really paying attention to the forms and asking people these types of questions. Have you competed anywhere else? What other clubs have you competed for? What area are you representing? What club are you representing? And asking those types of questions. A speaking area. Do we have to define a speaking area?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
I got some yeses and nos. We have to define whether we want one or not. And then if we say, yes, we do want one, then we have to define it. But if you don't tell anybody anything, is there a speaking area? No. I don't know. And so we had this contestant gave a phenomenal, inspirational speech. She comes up, touched an audience member on the shoulder. Tears are flowing from everybody's eyes. And another contestant protested, saying, you didn't define the speaking area. Couple things going on there. One, we should have set the expectations of saying, there's no speaking area, go wherever you want. But it left a question out there. But then you start asking, well, can you protest the speaking area? Can you?
If it's not defined, then fine.
You can't. There are 2 things you can protest in a contest.
Eligibility.
Eligibility
Originality.
and originality. That's it. So it's kind of this gray type rule of you have to define it, but even if you don't, you really can't protest it. I like to find the gray. I changed my title a week after I was moving on, so I'm standing at the division level. I just thought it had a little bit more meaning and impact to the audience. And so I filled out a new bio form, a new eligibility form. It had the new title written on it, and the guy read my old one. So there I am walking up to the stage, and they said the wrong title. I went, huh? I'm instantly thrown. That's my excuse for that contest, at least. You want to give everyone the best chance to perform their best, and even just those little things can throw some people off. So even the simple things like speaking order, have you thought about? How are you going to do it? Are you going to pick it out from a hat? Are you going to hand out playing cards? If you are going to pull it from a hat, do you have the hat? Do you have the names already written down? These are just the little details if you're not thinking about them. How many times have you seen paper ripped and people writing names down and putting them in a hat? I see people laughing because it's happened. It has happened. And those bio forms and eligibility. When I am preparing for a contest, and I'm sitting there hopefully at the district level or division level, I don't need people handing me forms to fill out. My mind is somewhere else. But yet it happens every single level. Every single time. It happens with contests. The little things can make a world of difference. And the chief judge and the contest chair are extremely important and integral to making these things happen. So the responsibilities of the chief judge. Can anyone be a judge?
No.
What's the rule?
You have to have at least 6 speeches.
You have to have at least 6 speeches, and that changed a couple of years ago. So for those that play in the traditional role, it's important to go and look for changes that have taken place within the rule book itself and not living in the past. But it's very important to go through and have not only your notes, but do a dry run and practice through it as a chief judge. And as a contest chair, make it a stage presentation of, I'm giving you a briefing. Practice it in your club contest if you want. Get credit for it. Nothing for free. But the briefing is often breezed over. Another example is the timer. You have the timer. Are you going to use lights? Are you going to use cards? Can you use both?
No, just one.
Just, you have to pick one. Have the speakers been given the opportunity to see those lights in action, changing colors? You want to give everyone an equal shot to be able to see what's going on around them. And if all of a sudden, the first time you see the lights, they're all the way in the back of the room. That was the second contest I ever had. The light was all the way in the back. Hello, are you back there? But the first time I saw it is when I was actually giving the speech. Again, ask the right questions. And tiebreakers, they don't even go to the briefing. They are supposed to be secret, and they have a special ballot. I opened up a ballot once, and I was the tiebreaker judge. Surprise! What are these 10 spots for? Oh, this little form. This little form causes so much angst. It causes so much inconsistency. And it causes so much controversy because of its subjectivity. Speaking order bias. It's been readily proven in American Idol. If you are singing in the latter part of the show, so if it ends at 10 o'clock and you have the 9:52 to 9:57 time slot, it has been statistically proven through Dowd Idol, a research company, that you have a better shot at winning. You are lost and forgotten, and people have fallen asleep, but if you've gone in the beginning. Well, we have these same situations happening at the speaking level in Toastmasters, and we've done both formal and informal studies, and we have seen similar trends at times. That the people who are speaking in the latter part of the order have a tendency to stick out, and if you are a judge and you're doing it purely off of memory, those biases are going to be that much heavier, especially in the latter part of the speaking. That's why it's important to be consistent with yourself as a judge. What do I mean by being consistent with yourself as a judge?
Not comparing one person against another person.
Okay? Not comparing other people.
Well, we'll suggest it to me you block off your ratings so you don't see how you compared.
Okay, so you are looking at just that person, just the criteria associated to that person, just the 5 to 7 minutes in front of you. Because you don't want to be, well, I've seen that person speak before. How'd they do before? And you start comparing them against themselves. By being consistent with yourself, you're committing yourself to scoring only the 7 minutes in front of you. You're committing to not compare the speakers. You're committing to not tallying your final scores, because if I say my score is a 67, the next speaker you do, you're going to say, well, maybe they're 68, or were they a 66? Huh. Don't tally. Just be consistent. And that means there are some people that don't like numbers on their judging forms. They like dots, or check marks, or notes, whatever it is. Just be consistent with yourself. Don't dot one person and number another. Be consistent with yourself. And score the speech holistically, based off of the entire criteria that's out there, not based off of what your favorite story is. I'm keeping politics completely out of this. This is not, I'm in political season right now. This has nothing to do with politicians. This has everything to do with communication. As soon as I put that picture up, who did you consider, in your mind, perception, the better communicator? Okay? So each of you have your own opinions. Democrats, Republicans. Don't talk politics and don't talk religion. Got it. Okay. But you have your favorite speaker. You have picked the better communicator, whether it's conscious or unconscious. You're thinking that other person is going to have to blow your socks off in order for them to gain points, or this other person who you really like is really going to have to screw up before you take points away. And if you have a tie, your tie's already broken. These biases, natural, unnatural, come about from our upbringing, our education. They come about from so many different factors that are out there, but they're there. They're real. Live with them. Understand them and be consistent with yourself and know the criteria that you're following. And you'll get it. Of these pictures, which one grabbed your heartstring the first? The first heartstring pulled it. Which picture? The cage? Yeah. I like to call this a deaf, dying, or injured bias. So I had a conversation with Ed Tate, former world champion of public speaking. Ed Tate says to me, we spent an hour going over competitive speech. He said, Tom, do you want your feedback glossy, semi-glossy, or unvarnished? And I said, unvarnished. He said, you will never win with that speech. That's unvarnished. I had written a speech about my friend who died at the age of 24 from cystic fibrosis. It means an awful lot to me. But he said to me, you have a deaf, dying, an injured speech and you're boring me already. It's overdone. And what you're starting to find with the world champions of public speaking is they're finally getting it as well. Because they're not just giving deaf, dying, and injured speeches anymore. They're talking about inspiration and change and action and overcoming obstacles and learning. And they don't have to be attached to a dying family member. But here's the disconnect. Not everybody knows that. So when you're talking about club level judges or area level judges and you're scrambling just to get a number, all of a sudden you're throwing these factors in and the right person may not be moving on. And you might be getting people that feel the appeal of the deaf, dying, or injured. In my division, I've been competing since 2008. No, I'm not bitter at all. Since 2008, and I have been the one who moved on with the deaf, dying, and injured speech to the district level. One time since that point have we ever had anyone finish in the top 3. And what that means is our division is caught up in these stories of dying and injured and overcoming these obstacles. And what happens? You get to the district who have very experienced judges there. There's a lot of them who flatten out that bias and they say, yeah, that's a good speech. We're sending the wrong people on for the wrong reasons. What do you do to get rid of that bias that is out there? You start by getting a high number of qualified judges. The more you have, the more you flatten out those biases that are out there. And when you're asked, well, you are required to have 5 at this level and 7 here, don't ask for 5 or 7. Ask for 15 and be happy with 10. We ask for 7, and when 2 don't show up on that day, now we're scrambling. Ask for an awful lot more. It really, truly reduces the biases that are out there. Ensure equal representation from all the clubs and from all the areas. Seems so simple, but you're reducing the biases when you can. Did you realize if you competed in that set of contests for that year and you did not move on to the next level, you can't judge to the next level. You can't judge any higher level. That's a small rule about this big, but we forget that sometimes. And you might have the, well, I lost to him, so he's not getting any of my points. And I'm getting some smirks, but it's happening. At least my bitterness tells me it happened.
Oh, I mean, any contestant that lost can't judge a higher level.
For that particular contest.
That's right. Throughout that one particular contest, not forever.
No,
only
just
for
for
the
this.
only for the one that you competed in.
It's defined for. It says this year at the humorous speech contest at any level is how it reads. So we're going to play a little
He
game.
could do the international speech. Assuming he
Yeah,
could compete, he could judge the international speech contest or the evaluation contest or something.
Yes, absolutely. So we're going to play a game called Who Said This? This time is different. More like the second snow, ice memory. The ground beneath him was slick, but he had more important things to think about. He was trying to focus on covering his face and hair to protect his fancy makeup and ballet bun. This was a point when Jonas realized he had turned into a 12-year-old female ballerina on her way to the opera house. There's a coincidence today. On this day, 390 years ago, the great explorer Sir Francis Drake died aboard ship off the coast of Panama. In his lifetime, the great frontiers were the oceans, and a historian later said he lived by the sea, died on it, and was buried in it. Who read the first one? Who wrote the first one? You'll never get it. My 12-year-old daughter, Erin. Pretty good, huh? Who wrote the second one? Anyone recognize that? Ronald Reagan, on his speech about the space shuttle disaster.
Or a speechwriter.
And you instantly get this, oh, it was read monotone and flat. But as soon as you got, hey, Ronald Reagan wrote that, the credibility goes up, and all of a sudden you have this, oh, halo effect. Halo effect means that you have someone who has a reputation as a great communicator, a great leader, a great speaker, and that might be a bias. Or you might have the opposite bias. A 12-year-old who writes this, whose father says it's really good, and you have this new person effect. The give someone else another chance effect. You know, Ronald's always doing this stuff. Let's give someone else a chance to do this. Or you get that sympathetic youngster feel to it. This fresh, new blood that you can bring up. Either way, we have a bias that's attached to it. But these words that I read are only words. That's content. Content in the international speech represents 50% of the total speech. But yet, when we're talking about these biases, we have to think holistically, how they're said, stage usage, voice inflection, nonverbals, all attached to this holistic other 50% that's out there. And so when they become more than just words or more than the person who just said it, and you're only looking at that 5 to 7 minute speech right in front of you, there's a difference. And all of a sudden, things start to get a little bit more fair when you start judging on that. We need to look at the speech holistically. There is one thing we need at the end of a good speech contest: a winner. That's all that our responsibilities are as a judge. We are not to evaluate. We're not to say, gee, they can do that better. We're not to say, hey, I think they can follow. They can do what better than they did before. Or I know they didn't have their best day, but I know that they will, so I'll just score them up. It's happened. We can't evaluate the speakers. We can't time the speakers. We can't compare the speakers. We can't judge the speakers. We can't even like the story. All we want is what's happening with the criteria that's right in front of us, and pick the best winner. So as we start to summarize this, to reduce these biases that are out there, is the things that we don't want to consider is what position they are. It's not relevant. What's happening right in front of you. The personal likes or dislikes. I like this person. I don't like that person. Not relevant. Whether you agree with the content or not. I can give a speech that is political or is religious. You may not like it, but if it's delivered well with decent content, you've got to score them well. I had somebody tell me, again, a competitor this year, in the table topics contest. Last year, they got up and they were announcing to the 40 people in the room, yeah, last year's table topic champion at the district level, as a judge, I didn't agree with what they were saying, but I scored them fairly. And I'm sitting there going, I won last year. And I'm being told that she didn't agree with it. Great point. I shouldn't have been in the audience, but it was a great point of, it's not whether you agree or disagree with the content, it's are you following the criteria. And I thought it was a very powerful message I was out there. How the speaker has done in the past, what you think they're going to do in the future, not relevant. The number of times you've seen them speak, not relevant. Remain objective. Look at your 5 to 7 minute speech right in front of you, or 2 to 3 minutes if it's an evaluation. Follow the contest criteria and be consistent with yourself. There's a couple other miscellaneous stuff that's in the rule book. And one thing is on props. Are you required to use props?
No.
Are you allowed to use props?
Yes.
In the judge's form, what's it say about props? Nothing. Another gray area. What do you want to look for as a judge with props?
Do they add value to the content?
Do they add value? That's really what you're looking for. Does it support the speech? Are they distracting you or detracting from the speech? That's as simple as you want to get with it. You get these trends. You see someone win with props, and the next year everyone has props. You follow the trends, but they're not required. And that's why it's important, because some people think in a humorous speech contest you're required to have a prop because everyone else does. You're not. The meaning of substantially original, it is listed that way in the rule book. What does that mean? Substantially original. 75% of your words, your thoughts, your ideas. 25% can be other people's passages, quotes, whatever it may be. But even that's subjective. You're going to sit there and time 2 minutes and 22 seconds worth of a Ronald Reagan quote? Huh. Completing a ballot. Handing in a ballot with first, second, and third, by the way, is not completing a ballot. How do you finish off that ballot? Sign it. If you do not sign it, it becomes instantly ripped. I have given a contest briefing before. I am passionate about this topic. I have said during the briefing, sign it now while I'm watching, and still had a ballot turned in unsigned. I don't get it. And a final piece, where the judges sit. How important is that?
So you can hear the speaker better in case the microphone doesn't work, whatever, so they need to.
Yeah, you want to be spread around. So as judges, you're getting different angles, different hearing, different seeing. You're seeing the whole picture. We're spread. You're not sitting next to a speaker making them uncomfortable, or they're not looking over your shoulder saying, how'd I do? Which happens. Seating is very important. If you do want to see any changes to the contest, what to remember is just know the rules. Surround ourselves with strong leaders. Surround ourselves with people that can help organize this thing. Do it as a team. Be prepared. Do the little things right, and the contest will come out if we are setting very clear expectations for the audience, giving them a briefing of what they're about to hear, briefing the judges, making sure that they understand, and the contestants that they know what's happening, and most of all, maximize the number of judges that you have. There will be some minor changes going from there were minor changes from 13 to 14. There will be some minor changes from 14 to 15. All of these can be seen on the Toastmasters.org website that's out there. The contest rule book, it's free. It's in PDF form. And for those that are familiar with District 45, Heather Perkins, a distinguished Toastmaster, was the one who put together the base of this presentation and allowed me to run with it. She is a phenomenal resource when it comes to this. If you want her to answer any questions or want me to answer any questions as you're going through the rule book, just get in contact with me. I'll be glad. So I think we have about 10 minutes for questions.
Yeah, and that seems to be a problem, at least in my district.
Okay.
And you know, how can you give people more than a minute to do the ratting?
Yeah, 1 minute, I guess 1 minute to evaluate after the speech music, because that's the way I guess. Generally, what I have been to some contests, and I think they say 1 minute. 1 minute of silence for the judges is what I think that's what.
Yeah, so if you are a judge, you're given 1 minute of silence. If during the briefing you said, I've done this before and I really need a couple minutes, you can't have 2 minutes. And you just have to set the expectations with the chief judge and with the contest chair. Minutes are usually is a pretty good time if you're not tallying at the end of that minute. So don't worry about tallying, and you're probably not going to get caught up in the calculator component of it. And then at the very end, after the last speaker has gone, there is no time limit. You can take 30 minutes if you need to. I'm very sensitive about the 1 to 2 minutes because I've sat there as an audience member for 2 minutes and it gets boring. Because you're not allowed to talk, or it creates that need to start whispering to the person, what do you think of that speech next year? So on your calculator question, though, is take as much time as you want, make sure that they understand it. And in your preparation for the judges, if they need to bring a calculator, invite them to bring a calculator.
Yeah. Well, the last time I was chief judge, which was a while ago, I went through the ballots and I was adding them up, and it was just, I think this district needs a math lesson. And it's like, I didn't know if it was appropriate to go back to the judges, and I did. I got them all back. And
there's two things you're mentioning here. As a chief judge, you should not see any calculations.
Right.
You should not see that top half of the ballot. In fact, that top half should be thrown away, destroyed, not shared, don't talk about it. But all you should be seeing is the first, second, and third. And so the calculator should be you and the ballot counters.
Right.
That's the people, and you should have a second person check your math. You should always have a second person do it. And that's why you want more than one ballot counter. And my math was off last week, but I knew I had someone there counting it off, and one number can make a difference.
So I'm a very inexperienced judge. The thing that I find really tricky is this 1 minute thing. There are 10 categories, I think, to score. And if you've put nothing on your sheet in 1 minute, that's 6 seconds. I think I would like to be evaluating holistically, but I can't see that I can do that in 6 seconds. And so I know when I've done it, I'm tempted to sort of be filling in numbers as I go. I wondered, I mean, maybe could you just tell us how do you do it? What is your approach to?
There's a couple things to it. The more you do it, the more comfortable you get. Know the form inside and out. So I know what I'm scoring. The first time I ever judged, I kind of thought I knew what the form was. And then I got caught up in the, well, how'd they do on verbal? But I can tell I'm scoring in my head, and I'm taking notes next to it in my own way. But as you get more comfortable, it becomes very easy to do it. And you say, okay, and as long as you're not doing just the story, and you know what's, the content is opening, body, conclusion. So I'm listening for supporting pieces of their opening comments. I'm looking for a good wrap-up at the end, so that's how I'm going to score content. And there's a couple different things you can do to practice it. One, get to know the form ahead of time. While people are giving club non-contest speeches, do it. And just get familiar with it. Or have a theme within your club and have everyone do it, whether they're experienced or not, and show what people are going through. And as soon as you do it a few times, you're going to say, okay, I get it. And it's not an easy job at all, but when you know the categories inside and out, you know where your points are. So 3 minutes into a contest, I might say, yeah, for verbals, I haven't heard a whole lot. I hear a monotone right now. Right now, I've got you middle of the road for nonverbals and voice inflection, and you're kind of just standing there right now, kind of doing your thing. And so right now, I've got you as average. So I might score it at, maybe give you 15 out of that so far. But then you start to change and pick it up. I'm going to start changing my own score for you. But I start to have an idea of where my baseline is for that person, not the baseline for everyone else. For that person.
And is that idea in your head, or have you actually marked your...
I mark the heck out of my paper.
Right.
I mean, I have other notebooks behind me too. I write the name of the speech immediately, so it's sticking in your head. And key points of, loved how they, I put left side of stage to help me remember a point, or great voice inflection, or character voices, whatever it might be, start to get me the points, and then I'll award it there. And if I run out of that 1 minute, I can just go back and check my notes. But be careful with taking notes, because you don't want to be buried where you're forgetting things, where you're not seeing what's really happening on the stage. So it's really a good skill to have to be able to do both.
Tom, I happen to not use numbers because people sit around you and they read your numbers, so I'm a dot dash check kind of guy.
Okay.
The other thing that I like to do when I'm judging is I write the first contestant on the furthest right side of the page in reverse order, so that I fold that over when I'm done with that speaker. So I'm not comparing to the previous speaker, and no one can read your notes. So I kind of do them in the reverse order on the page. That's how I'm comfortable with it.
Yeah, and it's a very well-known technique in Toastmasters to fold your paper over so you're only seeing the person that's in front of you. The dot dash is really an interesting concept, and that is, maybe you have your own, you do it any way you want, but again, be consistent with yourself. 3 dots mean I love you, 1 dot means get off the stage, whatever it might be. But if you start using dots and dashes, just be consistent with yourself, and it's kind of like shorthand for scoring.
I actually write a key at the top of my
There
page
you
to
go.
remind myself what I was saying.
And that's a great example of being consistent with yourself. And one last question or comment, yeah.
Can you talk about the weight that you give to the different categories of speaking skills criteria?
So the criteria themselves are established. So in the international speech, for example, 50% of it is content. 10%, I believe, is on grammar. You have another 30% that's part of the nonverbals, voice inflection, all comes into play. And then each one of those is broken down into different ranges. And then again, you come down to the question, well, if I have a range here, do I have to pick the end of the range? Can I pick something in the middle? Can I use half numbers? Use what's comfortable for you, but be consistent with yourself. But I think it's very important to start big. 50% of the speech is based off of content. That's a big number, but it's not the only number. A good chunk of it is use of voice and use of the stage, and nonverbals is a piece of it. Using the right grammar and the right use of the language, very important part of it, but it's only this much of it. So when you sit there and someone's like, hey, you know, like, ain't, you know, I can't even say ain't right, but you start speaking in different tongues and you're not using the appropriate grammar, then you sit there and say, wow, that they just were distracting with their grammar. It still only represents 5 or 10% of the total speech. So again, you're getting this bias of, I don't like the way they're speaking, but the scoring says you can only put them down for that much. And let's look at an example of the evaluation contest. The evaluation contest, a good chunk of it is based off of the summary in actions. So if I say that was a great speech and I'd love to see it again, I've seen judges, I've had conversations with judges who gave them points. That's not a summary. The summary is of the points you just gave them, and if you choose to do that, the point scale is actually 0. You do not give them points. And it becomes very clear when you have this form in front of you, not just the first time you've seen it at a contest, but you study it and you go through it beforehand as a judge. So I suggest you go through it in detail, and I think it's a great speech to do at the club level to get yourself some credit to talk about the form itself weeks before a contest so people get comfortable with it. Great question. So I need to wrap it up right now, but thank you so much for having me down here. I love this.